Hello everyone and welcome back to GUADEC, the first day. We are at the second track now and we are going to continue with the next presentation. We just finished a 15-minute break and we are going to have our next speaker, Nathan Willis, who is going to talk about a really interesting presentation with the title, I Control My Own Data, so what exactly can I do with it? Let's go, Nathan, the stage is yours.
Thank you. Coming to you live and direct from Willis Labs here in tropical London, England. Every year. So this is potentially a big topic, and I don't want to get stuck in the sides of it. So if the title is not 100% clear, what this means is we in the FOSS community talk a lot about this ability to own your data and that being important and being vital. That talk is often really large, and it kind of says stuff like you should ditch the services that you don't control and come over to free software. And it can get pretty extreme when people aren't real careful about their language choices, which I'll talk about a little bit. So I got interested in taking a hard look at it because these data export, account export features are pretty widespread these days. And although that's a good thing, show of hands, how many people have used Google Takeout or some other official download your archive feature? I'm going to assume everyone's raising their hands because I can actually see the room. But yeah, we're familiar with this. The question is, what's the real experience for a user like with real data that you get from an online service, right? And the reason that's important is that if you take your data and leave is going to work, then we've communicated correctly. And if it's not, it's going to leave people stuck without messages from their family and things that their friends shared with them. Severing your connections, coming over to free software, that's not much of a sales pitch. And people would, I think, likely be mad. So the outline for the talk, specifically, I'm going to take a look at what kinds of things you can actually export from some exports that I've done. I'm going to look at what FOSS utilities exist for using it, out of the box, and maybe what is sort of an add-on after the fact, additional effort that you can put into it and find something useful. And then I'll talk about how those sorts of questions are relevant to GNOME, which is, I think, important to focus on because a lot of these things are online services, and so the default thing might be, well, that doesn't matter, that's a web service, but it does matter. And an aside, this kind of comes up a lot whenever I mention this talk to people over the past 6 months. I'm very much not in favor of the deleting your old posts on social media thing. Deletionism is not the same as exporting things. And the reason this matters to me is that deleting your post creates link rot that breaks the web for other people who need it. And I ran into that all the time when I was doing PhD research. Get repos taken down, Reddit threads with a bunch of things missing in them, or something like that, and that harms the experience of other people. And sometimes the sales pitch that we give about that, the over-the-topness creeps in there. It's like, I'm leaving big tech, ha ha ha. And so that's sort of putting yourself in a bubble where the FOSS people aren't having any influence anymore, but it also kind of veers into shaming people for using services, and I don't think that's healthy. It's not really hurting the big company, but it is making the experience worse for other people. So I say instead, keep the posts and focus on things that you can do to inform people and equip them to use services safely. There's a lot of safe guides out there from the EFF and people. Stuff like Firefox Relay that has disposable email addresses that helps people avoid tracking way better than telling them what service to be on or not be on. And if you want to understand how advertising works, read Don Marty's blog. That will be more information than you can take in probably. And then just in general, stay around but make your account a source of migration help for people. I think that's the approach that helps the most people want the most data from those people stay private, stay under their control. Anyway, let's get to it. I've used takeout services many times in the past. Google has had theirs forever. In fact, during the Google Reader days, when they put that to sleep, there was this project that came along called Reader is Dead, which was sort of a download your archive and then use it personally, privately on your own machine. That's sort of my ideal scenario. Like, you can export your data from these services and then do something with it yourself. So when I started thinking about it, I just started requesting all the downloads I could find. That's kind of a lazy list of the ones I didn't get much out of Yahoo since I haven't used it in 12 years. They deleted my stuff. It's not comprehensive, of course. I don't have Apple accounts or Microsoft accounts. I might have had one through the university, but I've never used it. So don't consider this exhaustive. This is just a sample. Another thing I think worth thinking about is when you talk about pulling your data down and having it yourself, there's a lot of like blog posts and things that are guides on how to make yourself a big tech, and I didn't find most of those helpful. They tended to either focus on avoiding advertising or like avoiding bad actors, which I assume means trolls rather than community theater people. But they didn't really talk about using the data, and they kind of lumped everything into one bucket. And thinking about that, the model that really helped me go forward usefully was to consider that there's a barrier, there's a boundary, a public-private boundary, and each service might have something private that goes public or starts public and you pull it out privately. So reading a blog, it starts out publicly, you're pulling it down privately. Conversations over Twitter, they're all happening in public, so they're just back and forth out there. Other things are data that you want to remain private all the time, but that's not everything. So thinking about that boundary is a good way to consider this problem. So first off, what can you get in general? A lot of the big service providers, the biggest ones, have adopted this model where they have like a static local HTML file that lets you browse through your stuff. Sometimes they use something that's directly usable. Most of the time it's like JSON, which is annoying. And in fact, most cases it's JSON without a schema attached, so you can't use that for something, but you might have to work on it. I don't do JavaScript stuff. I can avoid it, so that's not great. But even when it's JSON, just remember it could have been worse. For the sake of time, I think I decided I want to skip over the multimedia case, like videos and music and photos. There's already kind of a risk of this topic being a mile wide and an inch deep. The thing is that videos and music and stuff, there's a lot more variety in how they're used and how people want to use them. Software that exists for it, I think that's because media is designed to be shown, so there's a lot of music players and video players and things out there, so we're gonna skip that. Let's take a look at some specifics. This is from Google Takeout. They have like a total of 57 categories of things you can download. This is just a subset of those, so it fits on the screen. But it shows you the local HTML interface that you get in the download. It has explanations of things, what they are. When the file output that is in the category you're looking at is HTML, it usually hyperlinks to it, although not in all cases, which is interesting. And yeah, 57 categories and a lot of subcategories. There's services that you can get your download for that I didn't know existed, like Google Arts and Culture, Google Reminders, Pinpoint I've heard of, View. Some of these things are standard formats, some of them aren't. Hopefully the ones that aren't tend to be documented. For example, this is odd. This is the tasks that you download and it's not in the V2Do format, which is what you would expect, but they've given you a JSON schema. That's pretty rare there. I wanted to note I'm leaving out some things like fitness data because I don't have that, but that's worth keeping in mind because that's potentially a really important thing to consider for users. But yeah, if I looked at what's good and what's bad, Google Takeout option. Calendars are an iCalendar format, great. Contacts are in vCard, great. Mails in inbox, great. It gets more complicated with location and map data because you get a mix of what I think is GeoJSON and then KML and then some plain text stuff. So I assume this is valid JSON. I'm not sure. If not, tell me. I'd be curious to know. The thing that is really not good, of course, is that Google Docs is only downloadable in PDF or in Microsoft Office XML. So you're going to have to convert that to use it. I was also surprised at some things I didn't find, like I wanted to get the Wi-Fi networks and passwords that I've saved in Android. You get a lot of Android stuff, but not that for whatever reason. Twitter account archives, pretty similar. This is the local HTML page. It doesn't show weird services I didn't know, so maybe it prunes those out if they're unused, rather than giving you the empty folder like Google does. It's searchable. It has a not terribly ancient Twitter-like design to it, but yeah, it's browsable. It sort of loads lazily screen by screen. On the good side, it seems complete. The search works, and it includes things you've liked. There's another category, like stuff you might have saved by liking it. Some complicated things are that you get your list of follows and followers by their internal Twitter ID, not by their name, or even by the URL. And the worst thing is actually that you don't get, well, the hyperlinks that you see on the page are not actually local to the rest of the archive. They're links to the live Twitter site. So those don't work if you're browsing it. And then also you only get half of each thread. You only get what you posted. You don't get, it's the same problem I was talking about with account deletion. You know, you don't get the statement that your reply was written to reply to. And if you personally haven't tried to find an answer on Stack Exchange or Reddit thread and seen the case where there's a deleted comment followed by a reply that says, thanks, that works. I mean, it'll probably happen to you this week. Swans, by the way, is a reference to Neuroth TED, which I suggest you look up. Moving on, Facebook archive very much like Google's. They have a lot of services. The HTML index is good. It seems to give you almost everything. That's like posts, comments, your original media. Again, friends and things that are like liked pages have these sort of internal IDs only that you can fetch on a live Facebook site. Again, the links aren't local to the archive you downloaded. And probably the worst complication is that messages, it's supposed to be in the archive and it appears totally broken. I don't know if that's a temporary thing or not, though. Just for the sake of argument, some other services you might be familiar with, LinkedIn. I mean, you don't get nothing, but what you get is plain CSV, including your contacts, which I think is the main purpose of LinkedIn. Something really weird is that it's automatically split into two downloads, the basic download and the complete download, but they have the same folders in both of them, so they don't know what you're thinking. GitHub, you know, now owned by our friends at Microsoft. When you download your GitHub account, you get full repos. It's hundreds of megabytes if you've made a lot of commits. You get original attachments if you attach things into like a comment thread or something. And it does include some JSON schema for things. What's complicated is the stuff that is not the repo itself, like issues and comments and release events. That's all custom JSON. It's not super usable in its native form. The stuff that's bad, though, is you don't get starter repos, which is kind of the thing I wanted most. You don't seem to get gists or gists. I'm not sure if it's buried somewhere. Same with things like follows and followers. It's not in there anywhere that I could find. It's possible it's still hidden, though. Not sure. GitLab. Oh, you don't get anything. You can't download your account data from GitLab. Sorry. Why? I don't know. There's a link about it. I mean, it's a good reminder that, you know, the sales team likes to say that they're better than Microsoft GitHub. They seem to be behind on this, though. Discourse. Discourse is, of course, an open source, like forum software, which you might hear and think, wait a minute, I thought we were only going to complain about proprietary services and celebrate the false ones. Well, no. You should be able to take your data out of anything, I think. Discourse gives you some pretty land raw CSV. At least it gives you something. I also tried GPotter, which is sort of the podcast synchronization service. It's kind of cheap, but I've never used like Spotify or Google Podcasts. And what you get from that is OPML, which is a subscription file format, and that comes up again later on, as we'll see. Mastodon. I would call this one all complicated. All you download from a Mastodon account is raw activity file objects in JSON. Looking at those on the screen, they're hard to make sense of. I wasn't sure if I could actually show a screenshot of the JSON without reviewing the token that needs to be preserved, because it's just jam-packed with things. Also, even the media attachments you get are clearly designed to be fed into the internal database structure. Right? It's a hash table or something, so not usable as a download. Firefox accounts, another null on that. This is like your synchronized bookmarks and your saved passwords and things. You can't download that data. And that's surprising, but you can. One of the precursors to Mastodon was Identica, also known as Pump.io. Again, there's no tools for downloading that. So Identica still runs, but there's no way to download your account info from it, at least not anywhere that I can find. Wikipedia also, I don't really know what usage scenario I was imagining there, but I was surprised that they don't offer something. And then there's a bunch of others, and this could go on forever. Some things to highlight, some of them are really good. Instagram, again, like Facebook, parent company, nice HTML browser, original media, things like that. Reddit, raw CSV, it varies. There's potentially interesting things in some of them, like in Amazon downloads, there's a ton of like internal things that don't seem to matter, but you can also get like a wish list you created and it has the ASIN product codes in it. You can get your Prime Video history, so you can see when you stop watching because of the ads and things. It doesn't give you things that I would have wanted, like MP3s that you purchased. It's a mixed bag. Brief takeaways just from looking at the overall set of downloads. I think the big vendors are providing a far better user experience. The discourse and Mastodon experience is not great. And that matters. It's not okay for Mastodon to not care about export and the export experience. You don't get a free pass just because the source code is free. Servers shut down. Vendors shut down, or they get unstable when it's not working and the backups fail and things. So the export matters even on open services. But now that we have the data, at least it's mattering of it, the big question practical level is what value is it to me? And I thought of a few specific ones. I'm sure there's others. Obviously, some of it is directly reusable. You export your calendar, you're just going to import that into another calendar now. Some of it you might want in order to search, like your message history. Who was I discussing that with? What's the name of that restaurant? Some of it you might want to reuse, to republish in some new location. And then some of it is raw data that you might want for like analytics purposes, like your location history. Maybe you could use that to plan a trip somewhere you've never been, but that's pretty indirect. I'm not sure whether that counts or not. Another one of the slides and caveats here. When I mentioned this to people, I had a lot of people, like when I was working on the talk, say, well, why don't you just use Nextcloud? Don't expect Nextcloud to save you. I'm being blunt here. There's a lot of polish there, not as much functionality as there might seem like. I do hate to break that to people, but I've polled, every time someone said, why don't you use Nextcloud, I would ask them if they had used it for the thing they were recommending to me for, and they said no. Everyone I talked to used it as the Dropbox replacement network storage case, except for exceptions like in count on one hand who also used it to do a shared calendar with their family. So it isn't going to save you, but even if it did, it's kind of just another network service, right? So we're going to look at what you can do after you've downloaded your data. And I'm going to say This is best looked at in terms of the category of data. So here are the categories we're going to go through. The easy one first, Office documents. Again, you're getting Microsoft formatted documents there, but it's kind of a borderline trivial thing to import them to LibreOffice. You have to, hope that you don't have some weird function that doesn't convert. You have the right fonts. Notes and things are a little more nebulous. They're usually plain text or markdown formatted, but it's hard to choose a universal app that you're going to use to repurpose the notes, so it's not as easy. Moving on, calendars. When I did my own personal audit of that public private boundary thing, calendars are as private as they get, I thought. And apart from making plans with other people, what you're doing is about as sensitive information as you can imagine. Like, are you going someplace? Are you working on something that no one needs to know about? And yet, we seem to talk about that as a big privacy feature. It's only been a recent addition to things like Proton Mail and Tutanoza. How you use it, it obviously deals with future events and past events, and those aren't the same thing. You might not care about importing your old calendar event history. You could just delete those calendar downloads and start over. But it could be useful to someone else, like things to know how many times they've been a place or something like that. Basically, your only option is to import that into another calendar app. You can't really search iCalendar formatted files. It's an old and clunky format. Not really a database behind it. It's just interpreted by the calendar app. Speaking of which, as if anyone to know, the calendar can import an ICS file, which is an iCalendar file, as a static calendar. When I tried this, repeating future events seems not to work. It might just be that it's trying to compute all the recurrences behind the scenes. I'm not 100% sure. The trick there is also if you have multiple machines, like a work machine, a home machine, or a laptop and a desktop, you have to import it every place. So in reality, what you probably want is a calendar server. There's some other options. There's this thing called Meteor Syncer, for example, but you can't just sync the file. When you import it into no calendar, it becomes a calendar internally. But using a calendar server directly isn't possible / easy. You can't just subscribe to a calendar, and no online accounts doesn't do that either. And the last note there is that it is even harder to also do this with an Android device. There's several apps you have to install that do the synchronization to the calendar server, but then what they're actually doing is syncing it to the local device calendar. So if your whole point was to escape from evil Google, you're right back where you started. I mean, there's not a lot of interface involved. Importing ICS becomes one of the calendars that lives inside the app. It's not super fast either. As a user experience goes, it's minimalist. On the other hand, Evolution can subscribe to network calendar service. You have to like using Evolution, though. I was not a huge fan of that. Thunderbird, which is what I have typically used for email, also can subscribe to calendar servers. Tellingly though, neither of those apps currently can sync a collection of calendars between multiple machines. I've heard that is going to come to a future version of Firefox Sync for Thunderbird. Manually repeating that process is pretty labor intensive, typing in these long URLs and passwords and things. One other note on this, to-dos are kind of built into the same format as calendars. iCalendar, I couldn't find a GNOME app that can import B-to-dos or B-journals. If there's one, let me know. To be fair though, to-do managers are probably the most complicated app category for anyone but yourself, because it's basically directly interacting with your mental model of doing tasks and projects. There's a shopping list, a checklist, recurring daily things, finding a big project with Kanban. It's all different. And in reality, I use Task Pointer. But then I thought about, if we can move things in, are there other things we could be doing with the calendar data? And one thing occurred to me, which is linking calendar events to locations and things like that for future events. The reason I thought of this is that there was an old Android app called Google Trips which was sent away to the countryside to run and play with Reader, Google Plus, and Wave. But what it did was scrape reservations for travel and for hotels and things like that, and put them together in a sort of trip view. There isn't anything like this as far as I know for GNOME, but KDE does have an app like that. It's called Itinerary. It's worth checking out. Contacts, moving on, very similar to calendars, except that I didn't see a way for GNOME Contacts to import VCF files, apparently. Again, Evolution Thunderbird can, or can use a CardDev server, but GNOME Online Accounts does not support raw CardDev servers, currently. And I did find one VCF file editor. It's the URL there. It's GTK2 and track and subversion, so that's you. Good luck. What else can you do with contacts? It's kind of an open question. Like maybe you would want to map contacts in from other services, like your friend lists and things. You typically get really terse info in your data exports, like LinkedIn as name and employment, and maybe email, and not much else. And then metadata like followers and use. It's useful, but it's outside of VCard. Maps and location. This in Google, which is all I have map data from. It's several distinct things: places you flagged, named lists, locations you've been, like your location history, and so on. Ratings and reviews. Those are all different. And different use cases, I think, for redeploying them. GNOME Maps, as far as I can tell, it can show you some information that you can favorite locations, but as far as I can tell, you can't import locations. The only remote account feature I found for it is OpenStreetMap, and I don't believe there's anything but editing support in those accounts. Yeah, there's other things I think that GNOME Maps could do with this sort of information, like map lists that you could share, sharing points of interest, sharing reviews. And like, this is not to say that GNOME Maps is failing at these tasks, just there's a lot of other things that maps could do, which you see in like the Google Map data that you download. I also looked at big email archives. That is a screenshot of many, many gigabytes of Google stuff. And in the mail, you just get a nearly 10 gigabyte single inbox, and that's not all of email, I think. I tried importing this directly into Evolution. There is sort of an add a second account workflow, which I found confusing. The dialog boxes are definitely written for connecting to a server, and you're not exactly doing that. So to know what to do, you kind of have to already know what to do. And if people have to go look that up somewhere, they're probably lost. Here's what I mean. You're having to fill out this form here, which is designed for, a real email account. Like, my name is in the inbox file. I don't need to fill that out. There is no reply to that's going to happen here. And then, it does load, but it still takes you through the wizard. And then it kind of starts failing other ways. The top failure there is the classic success fail, which is hard to understand. And it did eventually load the file for me, but it keeps triggering errors, which I think, like the screenshot below, are it trying to check for updates to the file. And that's because it doesn't understand that this is a static thing that is not going to be updated, I think. Thunderbird is a little better in that regard. It doesn't error, but it does get really, really slow. I think in reality, I've started using Not Much, which is designed for this archive case. As far as other message formats, I don't know. Is there a good way to import Facebook messages into something? Should you try to shoehorn that into the email case? I don't necessarily think so, but I don't have a better approach to it. News and feeds. I mean, as I mentioned, OPML is what you get from feed readers and podcast players. It's a list of subscriptions wrapper. It's actually a general outline format. Google News doesn't give you that anymore. It just gives you a list, plain text list, because they've taken out all of the RSS functionality. Here, GNOME News Flash connects to a variety of different feed reader servers, but not the one that I use, RSS. And for news, the main obstacle is actually going to be finding feeds. I did a lot of work on this personally. I got like 650 something feeds, not all at once, but most feed readers collapse at 100, including Nextcloud. When it comes to software projects, yeah, in theory, plain Git doesn't need a web service, so you download your GitHub stuff, you should be fine. Well, we don't know. I have not found any tooling for converting those GitHub events and comment JSON things into some usable form, although there's something that goes the other way around, which is interesting. Obviously, this is a much bigger issue. Joey has a page all about like distributed bug tracking, which I recommend checking out if you haven't seen it before. Another thought that kind of overlaps with this is that a desktop should really consider GUI interfaces to Git. I don't like GitHub Desktop. I had to use it back over Christmas when I was working with some font designers who were new to Git workflows entirely. People like GUIs for reasons. It's not, being non-technical that makes you like a GUI. People like to understand the functionality better. They can take it online and see it mapped out. So if you want to reach new users, that's worth thinking about. Is there a good, integrated GitHub Desktop alternative? The big one probably in this whole list is going to be social media posts. It's kind of where people get really unhappy with the service provider. So I'm going to talk about Twitter, and then that kind of propagates out to the rest by extension. This is the interface I showed before. The default has search, runs locally, but the links are broken. You could keep that on your computer and have several of those, the Facebook one and the Google one, and then search them separately when you want to find something. But for that to work, you have to know which site it was on. So that's not great. And if all you might do is search for things you've written in the past, you might be fine with the default. There are some alternatives, though. There's a couple of tools for better searching in GNOME F-Search. I never really got that to work. Catfish is not bad. That thing, Toonloon, is designed for Twitter and Mastodon exports. I never could get it to work. It doesn't have a license. Wouldn't depend on it. The more useful approach is to reformat the archive, fix the links. That's what this archive parser does. It generates static pages, it breaks them down into month and year, and it converts the follower IDs into full links, and it's non-destructive. It looks very stripped down by comparison, which is probably okay. They don't have the rights to that static files. It doesn't really solve the missing half of a conversation problem, but it does keep you marked down, and you could maybe use that. Other options, migrating to Mastodon, that's pretty tough. Bulk import is not possible. I found a utility for it, but generally server admins are opposed to that. And if you want to do it, you have to do it in the database yourself, which is not fun. You might have seen import-export in the sidebar. That's just for user account lists. This matters. Just running your own server doesn't help a lot of people. You have to be a server admin for that. I don't know. Going back to the archive explorer, the archive converter, I think what's worth exploring is enabling people to republish to their own site, like it's a static site. If you remember Posse, that's how it used to be. Convert your archive, post it on some domain that you own. That's as autonomous as it's going to get. I ran out of time to do this. I worked a little bit with Pelican, couldn't find anything, couldn't get happy with the theme really. But it got me thinking about static site generators. That is potentially a category of app for GNOME to care about. It might sound like an odd fit, but one of the selling points for static site generators is that it lives on your computer. And yeah, that's kind of chasing after small web projects. I think that's a receptive audience. Again, you might consider GUIs being used as part of that, and found one that didn't work with Pelican though. There's a lot more of these. A lot of converters out there, Reddit ones and Facebook ones that I didn't mention. I need to put these into a list and post it somewhere, obviously. The last thing to mention really is what you do with things that you've saved or bookmarked. They're not all bookmarks, they're not all things you're going to revisit. Some of them are just feedback you send to someone else, but what do you do with them? Again, the generic solution is OPML. Apparently there's no OPML editor. I was surprised to find that. It's essentially HTML with no layout stuff. And the reason you might want an app for that or some kind of bookmark editing app is that a browser's bookmark editor isn't great. You can't deduplicate things. Navigating is tough usually. If you're using the sync, it gets even tougher. Yeah, so something that's a good tool for editing all of these things that you've bookmarked or saved would probably be really helpful. Help you figure out how to rearrange them and determine what you want to save and what you don't. So that's the big tour. Some open questions exist. We don't necessarily need to go through all of these. Are there better ways to use some of this data? What else can we do with some of the things that are new ideas? As I mentioned, there's some gaps in no maps. Kind of an eclectic list of things that came up. Yeah, so like my conclusion is be export friendly. Think about the use case here. And yeah, circling back, exporting your data matters. And yeah, I should write more about this, but I hope that you will think about it yourself. And thanks for listening.
Thank you very much to Nathan for the very interesting presentation. At the moment, we don't have any questions in the Matrix chats, but you can just take a look and hopefully reply to the people if they have any questions afterwards in the chats. Does it sound okay?
Sounds good. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you very much. An applause. So now we are going to proceed with our next presentation. We are going to hear Manuel Haro sharing his experience, and the title of his presentation is Integrating the FOSS Community in LATAM to Projects and Strategies of GNOME Foundation. We are going to take just a minute to set up his laptop, and then we are going to continue with the presentation.